Live stream audio test, 1, 2.
I would like to welcome everybody here today to this face-to-face meeting of the Council in the new Council chamber. There's an option for those to join the meeting via Microsoft Teams virtually for those members and officers who cannot attend in person. They will be able to participate in the debate, but they will not count as being in attendance formally, which means that they will not be able to vote and their number will not be counted towards the quorum of this meeting. We're streaming this meeting today live on the internet, and a recorded version will be available within 48 hours on the North Somerset Council website. To avoid the need for councillors to sign an attendance sheet, and for the benefit of those watching via YouTube or joining virtually, we are going to not have a formal attendance sheet, but our solicitor will hold a roll call to confirm attendance, and after that I will proceed to the formal part of the agenda. So have we got our solicitor? Yes. Over to you.
We do indeed, Chairperson. And firstly, my apologies to members. I would normally be with you in person, as you know, but unfortunately I have caught the dreaded lurgy yesterday and have tested positive, so I'm confined to barracks along with a number of you. So apologies that I'm not with you. In terms of the attendance roll call, I'll just run through, if I may, by name, if you can just indicate if you're present, and I'll mark the register if we do that way. So starting with Councillor Applin.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Ashton. I know Councillor Ashton was hoping to join us, but probably by Teams, so I'll keep an eye out for whether you can join us by Teams later. Councillor Bell.
Present.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Bird.
Present.
Thank you. I've had apologies from Councillor Bridger. Councillor Bryant is with us via Teams. Councillor Butte. Okay, and I'll keep an eye out if Councillor Butte is able to join us late. Councillor Caniford.
Present.
Thank you, Councillor Caniford. Councillor Cartman.
Present.
Councillor Cato has given apologies but may be able to join us by Teams. I'll keep an eye on the Teams register for his attendance. Councillor Charles.
Present.
Thank you, Caritas. Councillor Cherry is joining us via Teams, and I can see her on screen. Thank you. Councillor Clayton.
No.
Thank you. Councillor Cotling is joining us via Teams, I believe. Councillor Cole. I've not heard from Councillor Cole. I'll keep an eye out. Councillor Crew has given apologies, but sorry.
Present.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Andy. Councillor Crew has given apologies, but may be able to join us by Teams. Councillor Crockford-Hawley.
Present, sorry. Not here, you've got the mic. Present.
Not here. Councillor Connolly has given apologies, as has Councillor Crosby, and Councillor Davies, I think he's joining us, but may be late. Councillor Gibbons.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Goddard has given apologies. Councillor Gregor.
Was that me?
I've not heard from Councillor
present.
Gregor. Thank you. Councillor Griggs.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Harley has given apologies, but may be able to join us by Teams. Councillor Halverson is obviously in the chair and present. Councillor Hearn.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Gins. I'm not seeing anything from David. Councillor Hogg.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Holland has given apologies. Councillor Jacobs.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Keating.
Present.
Councillor Lane Morgan. Hasn't been able to join us recently, so I'm assuming not coming tonight. Councillor McQuillan has given apologies. Councillor Neve.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Parker, I can see he's joining us by Teams. Councillor Payne.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Pepperell.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Petty.
Present.
Councillor Pilgrim has given apologies. Councillor Porter is with us via Teams, I can see. Councillor Richardson.
Present. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Shopland. Not hearing anything from Councillor Shopland. Councillor Sneydon.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Solomon.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Tonkin.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Tucker.
Present.
Councillor Westwood has given me apologies, and Councillor Willis. Not heard from Ros. Thank you, members.
Excuse me, did you hear me reply present?
I did indeed. I did indeed.
Right, because I don't have a working microphone.
Right.
I was the same, Councillor Hitchens.
I got you as well, Councillor Hitchens. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's proceed with the formal agenda now. Our normal item number 1 is public participation, but it appears that there haven't been any applications for that.
None received, Chairperson.
And item 2 is petitions to be presented by members. We haven't received any of those either.
No.
Item number 3, are there any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest? No, it appears not. And now we need to go to the minutes of the last meeting from the 10th of May for approval, and I believe the Deputy Leader is going to move the approval.
Yes, move approval, Chairman.
Have we got a seconder? Councillor Cunniford. All those in favour? That appears to be unanimous. I can't see it quickly enough, but I think it looks unanimous. Item number 5 is a slightly meatier item. It's the approval of the making of compulsory purchase orders and related side roads orders and traffic regulation orders for the Banwell Bypass and Highways Improvement Scheme. And I believe Councillor Hogg is going to move recommendations to the Council. Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully everybody's read the report. It's about 150 pages, so with about 13 recommendations. I'll summarise the key points for you. In 2020, we secured £97 million from Homes England to deliver Banwell Bypass and a new secondary school. And in June of that year, the Council approved an increase to the Council's capital programme in respect of the same amount, 97 million. Officers began engagement with landowners in the summer of 2020 and have licence agreements in place for surveys. Officers are now in the process of agreeing property cost estimates and negotiating heads of terms with the majority. There is a proposal to enter into agreement with all the landowners, but obviously there's a need for a compulsory purchase order process as a fallback to that, and that's a condition of funding that we have that in place. Following a report to the Executive in April of 2021, the Exec authorised all of the necessary steps to prepare the making of a CPO for the scheme and to enter into voluntary agreements with landowners for the acquisition of land required. The Council entered into a grant determination agreement with Homes England in August to deliver infrastructure to enable housing, so the decision this evening is in relation to the delivery of Banwell Bypass itself. So the project team have spent 18 months developing the design, undertaking advanced survey work and public non-statutory consultation, much of which has informed the scheme. And they are developing a robust planning application which is due for submission this month, a bit later on this month. And that's obviously subject to a separate process of formal consultation, not for discussion here tonight. So I'm seeking Council's approval this evening to allow the project team to serve a compulsory purchase order on all of the land parcels required for the scheme, and to make and publish any other such as side order roads, traffic regulation orders, etc., consistent with the CPO. There are some elements of the scheme, such as wider mitigation works, which aren't included within the CPO, but those elements are within the existing highway, and so can be delivered under the Highways Act 1980, and therefore don't require compulsory purchase powers. Now, negotiation and agreement is obviously the preferred method of land assembly, and I think there's an anticipation that, for the most part, that will be possible. There's a need to run the CPO process in parallel, because without the land being fully assembled, the project can't draw down stage 2 of the funding. So it's a condition of funding that we serve a CPO to offset any risk around non-delivery of land. So that's really probably the key point. So without the approval to proceed with a compulsory purchase order, there's a risk that the project team won't be able to meet conditions and milestones set by Homes England to provide assurance that the project can be delivered. The land required for the bypass consists mainly of agricultural land, but there are impacts on a few, probably 4, residential and commercial properties. Those are detailed in the report, but just in summary, 25 Castle Hill, there's a minor impact, loss of hedgerow and part of the garden of that property is required. Stonebridge Farm Caravan Park, there's quite a significant impact to that business, loss of caravan park facilities, including pitches. Banwell Football Club has a significant impact, but obviously we're looking to mitigate that by re-providing alternative replacement land for the club. And Court Farm Country Park, a minor impact. Obviously, further discussions will be brought back to the executive at appropriate stages in the project ahead of entering into the construction contract. The CPO can be aborted if it was decided at some point that the scheme wasn't going to progress. All costs associated with entering into the CPO are accounted for within the Stage 1 budget, including sufficient budget for land assembly costs and legal fees. So in summary tonight then, I'm asking Council to authorise the making of the compulsory purchase order, approve the red line plan, which you'll see in the appendix. You may have seen there's been a new document that came out which showed some very minor changes to that red line, very, very minor. Authorise the making of side road order and traffic regulation order, and give delegated authority to enter into agreements with landowners to withdraw objections to any orders, submission of the CPO and SRO, implement the CPO and take possession of land, make necessary amendments to the orders, and allow us to prepare and serve all necessary CPO documentation and prepare for and present a case at public inquiry. So I'll be looking to move that motion.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Solomon. Sorry. Any comments, or can we proceed to the vote then? All those in favour? Oh, you may have to count.
If you could do all against, and then yes, I think it's the majority. Yeah.
It's a definitely majority in favour. So, any against? Any abstentions? No. Okay. It's carried.
Thank you, Chairperson. That's carried.
We move on to agenda item 6, which is a Metro West Phase 1 update, which I believe is going to be moved by Councillor Cartman.
Thank you, Chair.
So I'll try and keep this brief. I know there was a members' briefing earlier in the week that many of you went to. But just in summary, we're seeing this because costs have gone up on the project. And it's time for an update to council. So I was trying to keep this kind of simple and straightforward. And to my mind, we've got a decision tonight whether to fund essentially extra money in. It's £10 million in terms of the report. If we took the other decision and decided not to go ahead, we would have to bear a cost of 15 million into the council's finances. If we don't pass this tonight, I think would be a fair assumption. If we vote for this, the whole thing will cost 20 million to us as taxpayers. The project cost, of course, is much, much greater. But that's really the decision how I see it. The other main concern really for me is what's going to happen in the future. Are we going to be back here in 12 months with people asking us for more money for a project where its costs have escalated from 116 million on the capital cost up to over 150 million? Well, the short answer to that is no, because we're hoping that the government will give us a piece of paper to say that they will bear the risk of any further cost escalation due to inflation, which, as we know, is a significant problem. So the decision for us tonight really is if we want to progress with this, if we want Portishead to have its railway as part of a wider investment into its public transport, and we're talking about bus services later too, are we prepared to stump up a bit more money, a capped sum of money, because the government's going to underwrite anything else, to enable that to happen? And I'm of the view that that is a good investment. The extra money is broadly coming from us, from WECA, and from the Department of Transport. But this decision tonight is contingent on those other people confirming that they are willing to stump up a bit more cash as well, and also confirming that we're not to bear any future risk of overrun and cost escalation in the future. Now, there's a lot more in this paper, as I'm sure many of you see, but I'm going to bring my my remarks to a conclusion there, because I think that's probably the right point to open up to questions. And we have James here as well, who many of you will know gave the briefing, but is here in case there was a more detailed questions that came up and concerns, reflecting that this is possibly, I think it is the biggest capital project that we're undertaking in the region for a number of years. So I'd like to open to questions, Chair, if I may.
Can we have a seconder for this? Councillor James? No? Councillor Caritas? Caritas. Charles.
Was Hugh just seconding? Because I think he was ahead of me. Oh, okay.
I was seconding and asking to speak, but not amending.
Then I think Hugh was ahead of me. He should go first.
Yes, it was Hugh James got there first, I think. But
Thank
you
very
wanted
much,
to second
Chair.
it as well.
And thank you, Councillor Charles, and obviously the executive member. The Portishead Railway is so long overdue. I don't need to re-emphasise this. I've already spoken extensively about this in previous council meetings. I'm glad to see our continuous commitment to this much-needed project. The Odyssey was only a 10-year journey, which seems like a really Speedy Gonzales journey compared to what North Somerset Council has endured. Thank you so much to, I'm going to say thank you very much to Nigel Ashton, who started this project, and thank you to the executive members of this administration for continuing. You know, it's really people of North Somerset and Portishead who have driven this forward. It's, to be fair, the previous Conservative administration and other councillors that picked it up. It's us, this administration, who moved it forward. It's not government. The Prime Minister Boris Johnson said that the Portishead line, he believed in the Portishead line, that he would look at it when he first became leader. Well, this project, even signing off on it, has outlasted him. So it's been a real failure of this Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak has failed to fund this project, who I believe is coming to the next election. So this project, the fact that it's not on the rounds now, is a failure of him as a treasurer. The fact that it hasn't happened and the minister hasn't signed off is a real failure of the Transport Secretary, who I believe is also a Conservative candidate for the Prime Minister next. So, but what's important is that North Somerset Council is supporting this project. It's been making this happen throughout, and that we're continuing to do so, acting in good faith. It's great that the government now are finally sort of de-risking this, there's one more push to get this over the line, but it should never have gotten to this case. This project should have happened by now. Thank you so much for continuing to invest in this project. In some ways, it's too big to fail on our part. We've invested so much capital in such good faith, and the government have not really followed through, but let's hope this one final push will get things to happen and give us the railway we deserve and that we've been fighting for so long.
Thank you, Councillor James. Anybody else? Councillor Charles.
Thank you. I did some door knocking and sounding out of people on social media in Portishead about the railway, and it still remains a hugely popular concept, but what I would urge the administration to do is to further engage with the public in Portishead. There's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a lot of confusion as to what the costs will be, what the end game will be for the railway, and also what other solutions to Portishead's ongoing traffic problems will be in the pipeline. A hourly service from Portishead to Bristol will not solve Portishead's traffic problems. It'll help, but it will not solve. We have severe gridlock in our town. So what I would like to ask from the executive and the administration is to, on top of the extensive consultation they've done with the public, that they continue to engage with the public, inform the public of the process, inform the public of the costs, and also inform the public as much as possible of the end game, so that we don't see, as Councillor Cartman says, the bottomless pit of money with no results.
Thank you very much, Councillor Charles. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'd just like to thank the officers who've obviously done an awful lot of work to get us in this position where we have de-risked the capital side of this project. But I think I should point out that there's still risk in the operational side, which has now emerged. Can somebody tell us what the risk is on that side of the project, please?
Do you want me to?
Would you like to
reply?
reply?
I mean, as far as I'll probably give way to James over there, but it's there's an £11 million shortfall on the operational expenditure, spread over, I believe, the first 4 to 5 years of operation, up until that point when I think after that the railway would come under the jurisdiction of the rail operator, I believe, in terms of its subsidy and running. But we will be expected to fund a portion of that through our revenue budget. Now, depending on when the railway opens, of course, that will stop, and the pattern of that is yet unknown and will depend to a certain extent on usage and demand. So you're absolutely right, there is a risk to manage there in the future in terms of supporting the railway in its early years. Is there anything that anyone would like to add?
Would you like to reply to this, Councillor Richardson?
Hello.
Or does that answer you? Okay. Can James Wilcox please answer this?
It's just actually asking a question about the size of the operational risk we face.
Right. Yeah. Sure. So the situation that we've reported is very much the worst case scenario. And there are quite a lot of factors at play here, considering that we've only just come emerging from the pandemic. So obviously passenger demand has been a real issue over the last 2 years or so. So there's further work that's needed, and it's work that we need to do in collaboration with the DFT and with WECA. So there's a range of different possibilities with this, and I think the other thing that needs to come across here is that the headline figure that's presented, the 11 million, is for the whole suite of services within the Metro West Phase 1 scheme. So that also includes the costs of enhancing the Severn Beach line and the Bristol to Westbury line. So, it is quite a complex bunch of operational costs that just need to be worked up into more detail.
Thank you so much. Is that okay? Okay. I believe Councillor Ashton was next.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say many thanks to James Wilcock. I mean, not just the presentation he gave me the other day, but for all the years he's been working on this. I know how long and frustrating it's been. And just a word of caution to both Caritas and Hugh, I think it was, on some of the comments, because for 25 years we've been telling the public how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take, and then had to backtrack. And Hugh, that's been something like 8 trade ministers of all different colours who've come down and said it's a wonderful scheme and supported it, and then nothing's happened. So I'd be very, very careful about criticising any current politician who may be the decision maker in a couple of weeks' time. The presentation answered most of my questions, but I do have some concerns, and it seems to be the delay, which I think is really frustrating and unnecessary. The last couple of delays we've had, nothing seems to have come from them. They've been asking questions that were, I think James was able to answer even a year ago or so. But it's things like reducing the length of the platform and no station and 3 carriages instead of 5. That really is nitpicking on costs in the face of what the overall cost is going to be. And I think that's self-defeating, because as popular as the line is going to be, that I've always believed it's going to be a far more important social line as well as business. By reducing it to 3, you're actually cutting down the number of people who can actually get on it. You're reducing the viability of it. And presumably the figures have been recalculated to reduce the number of passengers expected if we reduced the capacity from 5 to 4 carriages. And secondly, when it becomes popular, we will need to increase the platform, and it's going to be twice as expensive to do it then as it is to do it now. So whilst you're not doing any work at the moment, I guess some will be going on. As you get to the stage where government or DfT actually commit to the figures, which I'm sure they will it be possible to look at contingencies or other costs and see whether or not it would make much more sense to get on with those extensions rather than wait until we're at capacity? And things like I mentioned the other day, things like not having a station on the platform, that's fine in the summer, but in the winter it would be quite prohibitive. And surely we can get, I don't know, Costa or Sainsbury's or somebody to sponsor a cafe and meeting room and waiting room whilst it's being built. So thank you, James, for everything you're doing, and good presentation, and keep going. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ashton. And yes, thank you for starting this project. I'd like to echo what my colleagues over there said. I believe Councillor Hogg would like to speak.
Yeah, it was just in response to Caritas's comments there. So I think just on the engagement piece, I think I am really keen that we are out in the communities, not just Portishead, but all over North Somerset, having a big conversation about decarbonisation, active travel, public transport, rail, all of it really. So, you know, I'd welcome your challenge there to make sure that we're continuing to engage with Portishead. And the other point I wanted to make is, you know, you talked about continued congestion in Portishead. Of course, the rail link won't be the only game in town. We have also, you know, a small number of about 60 million quid for BSIP, which is going to deliver a huge amount of benefits for modal shift within North Somerset, including Portishead. I think Portishead will gain a lot from that. There's a lot of placemaking work going on in Portishead as well, thinking about spaces, thinking about places and sensible use of roads and of routes and active travel. So we should though, just emphasise the fact it'll be a 24-minute ride into Bristol Temple Meads, I think, and bring 50,000 people within commutable reach of Bristol or of Portishead coming the other way. But I just wanted to note those comments.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg. Councillor Charles?
Totally agree with what Steve said, but also there are more complex issues. For example, like many people work in major industries in the north of Bristol, such as British Aerospace, particularly in my ward, and therefore a train into Temple Meads isn't going to help their public transport problems.
Yes, there's never an easy solution to everything, is there? Thank you, Councillor Charles. Can we go to the vote now then? All those in favour? Anybody against? Any abstentions? No? Solicitor?
That's carried. Thank you, Chairperson.
Okay. Hang on, where are we?
Item 7, Chairperson. Reports and...
Item 7, reports and matters referred from the executive, dated the 22nd of June 22. It's the bus service improvement plan, a minute extract from the executive, and I believe, Councillor Hogg, it's your turn again.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, busy night for me. So I presented the BSIP to the exec a couple of weeks ago, the last exec, and this evening what I'm asking Council to do is to approve an increase to the capital programme of 48 million quid in respect of outlined DFT funding award, and delegate to the Director of Corporate Services, S151 officer, to increase the 2022-23 revenue budget by up to 12 million, although that might change, to be funded from BSIP grant allocation. In essence, for those of you that weren't at the exec, I'll just very briefly go through the presentation that I presented to exec. What a time to be coming on to the exec. Usually, it's conscious that so often over recent years we've been making cuts or having difficult conversations with council, and here I am talking about an award of 48 million quid capital funding and a chunk of a further 60 million quid for revenue. So it's probably the most significant and historic funding stream that we've seen in terms of our bus services over recent years, I would argue. And it will help to accelerate our decarbonisation plans. It'll complement our active travel plans and our cycling and walking strategies, and hopefully change the lives of a great number of our residents who struggle at the moment to have reliable, clean buses or alternative to driving a car. I mean, it couldn't come at a better time. 43% of our emissions as a county come from transport. We are much higher than our neighbours, our regional neighbours, and therefore we've got disproportionately more to do if we are to achieve our aims of being net zero by 2030. You stand back and kind of look at that and think about what we need to do. It's something like a 17% year-on-year reduction in car travel, or the emissions from cars, every year between now and 2030. And during the pandemic, we saw car travel reduced by about 20%. So it's extremely significant. In October 21, the executive approved the BSIP model in partnership with WECA, and that's proved to be a very successful partnership. So far. The DFT notified us of an indicative award amounting to 105 million across WECA. 48 million pounds of this is capital funding for North Somerset. And as I said at the start, it's a sizable share of 57 million in revenue. The capital funding will be used to a large extent in making interventions on our road network. So a lot of this isn't actually about buses, it's actually about facilitating buses, about providing bus prioritisation at traffic lights, road space reallocation, those sorts of things, rather than actually, wheels on the road. The revenue funding is about supporting eye-catching and appealing fares packages, about driving up patronage and getting people back on the bus. Subsequent to the executive meeting on the 22nd of June, the spend profile has been adjusted in agreement with WECA to allocate more to the fares packages, because we feel that due to driver shortages at the moment, we need to be focusing on the short term at least on stabilising the bus network and encouraging more people to return to the bus, at the same time addressing the cost of living crisis for local residents. Following that initial BSIP period, there will then be in a better position to start to expand existing services and create new services which can be sustained into the medium term. In other words, there's no point spending a chunk of money on shiny new bus services when there are no drivers to drive the buses on them. So much better to invest that money in existing routes and driving up patronage on existing routes and get people back. Discussions have commenced with WECA on working up the fare package in a bit more detail. One condition of the funding from DFT is that we build a delivery mechanism to ensure the greatest opportunity of success. That's called the Enhanced Partnership. You've probably read that in the report. Think of that as a regulatory framework where bus operators, North Somerset Council, WECA, highways authorities sign up to a mutual and legally binding set of mutual commitments, basically a way of setting out all of the asks of the various partners at the outset. Officers have also been developing a commissioning plan which sets out like a shopping list, if you like, of the key interventions, the key schemes that will deliver much of the capital funding. So we're looking at 18 bus priority schemes, 4 new interchanges, 400 new bus shelters or bus stops, cycling integration, etc., all the things that you see within BSIP. At our last exec meeting in June, the exec noted the current enhanced partnership and delegated to the exec member the authority to approve the final version on behalf of council. So tonight, it's about approving the increase to the capital programme, as I outlined at the start, and the revenue budget. One thing I would just like to point out, though, I'd be very keen and welcome scrutiny as we work through the BSIP process, either through task and finish group or through a scrutiny function. I'm happy to take any advice on that as we go forward, but I'm really keen to make sure that the council is fully engaged and involved in the shaping of BSIP as we go forward. So that's it. So I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor James? Councillor James seconding. Thank you. Any? Oh, Councillor Bell?
You want to speak, or
okay,
I can speak?
All right, I'll go.
I can always
first.
speak.
I'll go first. You don't have to give way every time, do you? I absolutely welcome this obviously proposal, and in the end, a bit like the rail issue earlier. You know, why wouldn't we do this? Because we're being given some money to invest in services, so why wouldn't we do that? I just wanted to say 2 things. One of which I've said before at the executive meeting, and that is that I think it's really critical as part of the investment that we deliver through the bus service improvement plan and through the enhanced partnership, that we encourage the bus operators to do better in terms of the engagement and involvement of communities. So we are a very diverse community across North Somerset, with obviously major towns, but also a number of rural communities where a mix of solutions are required, and they're not always going to be commercially viable. They will require involvement of community operators and town and parish councils, and I think the big bus operators have been poor over the last few years in terms of engaging with town and parish councils, and at times engaging with North Somerset as well. So I would really encourage our officers and Steve to do what you can to influence operators to do better, and I would encourage the operators to think, do what it says on the tin. It's supposed to be an enhanced partnership, and partnership requires both parties to be involved. And actually, on that point about partnership, I would also like to say that it's not wildly helpful in the context of bus service improvement and the enhanced partnership to see the kind of mixed messages that we've seen from First recently. For example, just this very month, we've got increases in fares in Weston-super-Mare and other areas, up to 33% increase at a time when there's a cost of living crisis. Now, we appreciate that the operators are not immune from that either, But at a time when we're also working to invest in bus services and reduce fares, it really does seem counterproductive to be putting fares up. And to be doing that at the same time as having events to give free bus travel, which is one of the things that First is also doing this month. Great idea to encourage people onto their buses. I'm afraid that does smack a bit of mixed messages. So I would just encourage again, partnership is a two-way thing, and it cannot just be about public sector investment in bus services and subsidies for bus operators. It must also be matched by investment from the private sector. If they want to continue to operate private services and make a profit on the back of it, then I'm afraid they've got to meet us halfway in a genuine partnership.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. I believe Councillor James raised his hand next.
Thank you. I didn't thank officers previously in the previous motion, so thank you to them now. But for this motion especially, it's a real success story of not just North Somerset officers, but transport officers across the west of England working together in partnership and actually making better services for all our residents, which sometimes those success stories can be quite rare. But this is a real example of how North Somerset, working in partnership with other authorities, has made us gain bits of funding that other authorities can't. Somerset got no money in this BSIP, but the strength of our bid made us get this rather hefty sum. So it's fantastic news for our residents. But will our residents see it as that? Well, I was on the bus today, as I am usually, and I was with a mother of 5, and she told me that she was in social housing. We talked. And she said, oh, it's so unaffordable. Then on the tannoy, there was the announcement of the Western fares going up. She heard that, and then she almost started crying. This affects working families so much. It's almost like the energy cap, where the government gave us all money to deal with the energy cap, but the market price is going up so much that people can't even feel those changes because it's hardly making up for the amount that fares are going up to make them unaffordable. Great that we're having free buses soon on, is it the 27th of July? Wonderful news. Hopefully that will get more people on the bus, but really we want reliable services. What I will say is that in Portishead, there have been some changes to buses, and it's an example of they've improved the services. There was a lot of fear about the changes that went on in Portishead, but I've looked at the patronage data with the officers, and the changes that First Bus and officers made, I wasn't a fan of them at the time. I've made a much more reliable service that is much more used than pre-pandemic. So that's great news. The fact that First Bus now come to speak to Portishead Town Council on a regular basis, and it's a way that both members of the public and myself can speak to First Bus directly. Wonderful news. If we can see that in all our towns and villages, even the better. So this is really great news, but it could, as always, the engagement could be better everywhere. And, it doesn't look like they're acting, First Bus are acting in very good faith when we're, making their services viable for them and that they are increasing fares in our area. But great to see that we can collaboratively work. Thank you, officers.
Thank you very much, Councillor James. Councillor Crockford-Hawley is next.
Thank you, Dr. Havison. Encouraging to hear that Portishead Town Council is being so successfully proactive, because Western Town Council has also invited First Bus to have conversations. Thus far, I'm not aware of any positive response from. So we clearly need to shout a little louder than Portishead colleagues do. It's very important that we encourage greater patronage, but at the same part of doing that is to surely improve the image of bus transport. If we were living in a metropolitan area, we would all naturally go by bus because everybody living in a metropolitan area does. But here, I'm afraid, there are still people who consider going by bus the sort of thing you do when you can't afford to go in your car. And that impression has to change, and I think we are as duty-bound as the bus companies are to do that. I was very disappointed when some time ago First Bus suddenly announced, almost overnight, that 4 services in Weston-super-Mare were going to be withdrawn without any form of consultation. But very happily, a competing organisation, Stagecoach, jumped in, created the number 50 route, which has become really rather popular. So with imagination, these bus companies can make a profit and they can provide a service. And I think that's really very important. I'm not convinced, as Councillor Hogg seems to be convinced, that people will choose to go by bus because it is environmentally better than jumping in your car. I think most people will go on the bus because A, the service is good and reliable, and B, it's reasonably cheap. If we're saving the planet in the process, then 3 cheers. But that is not the principal reason why people travel by bus. And I'm also not convinced that if everybody starts going by bus, we will reduce the unwanted carbon emissions from this area, most of which are manufactured by cars progressing north or south along the motorway. And our local buses are not going to change that 1 iota. Iota being the unscientific way of measuring carbon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crockford-Hawley. Councillor Charles?
I find myself in the extremely rare position of actually agreeing with Councillor Crockford-Hawley on several matters. One of the things I'd like to say first is I'd like to congratulate Councillor Hogg in his early part of his role. I know he's actually been to Portishead and talked with transport activists, for want of a better word, and has been very proactive in that, and I hope he shall continue to be as proactive as that. What I do have concerns about, though, and it reiterates what other speakers says, is the economical of the truth approach by some of the bus operating companies. We have grave concerns in Portishead about certain routes, and we hear this week concerns that certain routes might be removed by First, that we were trying to hope to save and if not extend. And we would like a more proactive dialogue than we are having with the bus companies, and we'd also like the council to be quite robust with First and Stagecoach in their honesty and approach with the community. So I applaud Councillor Bell for his comments as well. And I also think we need to highlight the personal effects of transport and the lack of transport to our communities. Within my own ward of East Ward, I have a person who has a major brain injury who moved to the East Ward because of the ability of its bus service through the marina, and is now effectively housebound because they can't use the bus service that is provided. I have people who are elderly residents who feel confined because the public transport service is not adequate. And I hope that this has been a There we go. Thank you. So I hope this administration is also as well will be proactive in campaigning on the human side and the importance of transport as a vital human right, as more of anything else, for communities that we have within North Somerset. And I also agree with Councillor Hawley that it'll take more than just some investment in bus services to change it. They have to be fast, they have to be reliable, they have to be frequent, and they have to be cheap. Due to the recent cuts in my ward, I have residents that were commuting that are actually buying additional cars because they can't now go on the bus service through the marina. So we've got a lot of work to do, but I commend Councillor Hogg for his work so far.
Thank you very much, Councillor Charles. Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Chairperson. I very much welcome Councillor Hogg's offer of scrutiny and discussion and input as we develop the plan, particularly to give the view of some of our rural communities who have been very much impacted by the recent cuts in services. It's one of the key discussions that comes up at the Parish Council. is that we have people in the villages who don't have cars and now completely cut off from access to the towns or to essential services. So whilst it's great to talk about developing new services, I think one of the priorities should be restoring those services that have been cancelled, or at least looking for a way to replace them. But very much support the development of new services or improving existing services, particularly connecting our more isolated villages. For instance, to get from Blagdon to Weston-super-Mare is about 25 minutes in the car. The best option that the bus will give me is 3.5 hours going via Temple Meads, and that just doesn't work, does it? So when we talk about making buses the go-to option, the default choice for people, that has to really be taken into account. Nobody's going to sit on a bus for 3.5 hours when you can do the journey in 20 minutes. And I think I share the concerns that others have expressed around the reliability of our partners in the bus operating companies. And I just wonder what powers or options we have to compel them or to keep them accountable to delivering what we need. Because I do fear we make this investment and we subsidize them, and then in a few years down the road, they simply pull the services again and we take the blame, because in the perception of our residents, it's the council what runs the buses, not First Bus. So hope those will be taken into account as we go forward.
Thank you, Councillor Keating. Councillor Gibbons next.
Thank you. Gosh, a lot of my points have been covered, but I do have a couple of questions. Again, I think it's a wonderful scheme. It's fantastic that we're getting this investment in our buses. I just want to raise a couple of points that have actually come to me from residents. One of which is I hope that there will be real consideration given to accessibility for disabled and blind and partially sighted people in these new buses and in the new service, because they do struggle to use the services. And the other comment I had from 3 or 4 residents who took the trouble to ring me up was to say that it's all well and good to have a wonderful new bus service as long as it's running on roads and drawing up to pavements that are well maintained, because, you know, again, elderly people who have to go along to a pavement, go onto the bus stop and negotiate bumpy pavements with holes in, and then get on a bus that sort of rattles along hitting potholes, they find quite upsetting. And I suppose they want to be sure that this package will make sure that the buses are great, new routes, and running on roads that are well maintained and give them a decent ride. Thank you.
Can I just remind you all that really the debate ought to concentrate on the recommendation, which is recommending the uplift of the budget. So I know I appreciate all your enthusiasm for the, I'm equally excited by this whole topic.
I'm going to feedback on all of these points. I hope people realise.
Yeah. But so I'll go back to my list of speakers. The next one who asked to speak is Councillor McQuillan.
I've withdrawn my request to speak, Chairperson, as other members have covered my points.
Councillor Cartman.
Thank you very much. I think just very, very quickly, this is a brilliant thing to do, and I welcome the recommendations and support them, I'd say. I mean, I did a quick calculation that we're less than 0.5% of the UK population, and we've got 6% of the national funding, which is amazing. It's £250 for every man, woman and child in North Somerset to improve our bus services, and then on top, extra money to subsidise them to get them going. But before we get to that utopia of lovely bus services, we have problems today. And I would like to, I've been talking to the team in the council, but really would ask Councillor Hogg to make sure that he doesn't just focus on building for the future, but deals with some of the issues of the present, and particularly how we can support people now by making or asking the bus service operators to make small changes to their bus timetables. And I give 2 very quick examples. We don't have a late night bus now coming through Long Ashton. We've got one flying down the bypass, though, at late night from Bristol. We could get that diverted easily. Also, slight changes to the bus timetable would help a lot of school children from my area as they commute to Backwell and Nailsea. Now, the team are aware, but I think the wider point I'm making for the council is I do think we need to focus on both the long term and perhaps putting extra pressure on the bus service operators to make minor changes that would really help our residents as we move towards this much better long-term solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cartman. And Councillor Neve?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reiterate a little bit of what Councillor Keating and Councillor Cartman said. You know, I had another email yesterday from one of my residents who cannot get from Congsbury to Yatton for essential services. Steve knows about this. He's very familiar with the problem that we don't have a service at all to connect those two communities 2 miles apart. And that's essential. So while I absolutely welcome the BSIP money, it's fantastic, I am conscious that I would like to see, when necessary, and possibly the pressure on the operators through the partnerships that Councillor Bell mentioned, to provide interim services, even if they're only for a couple of years while new things happen, that will reconnect those essential centres that my residents and other residents need. And it would be nice to see some of that coming through, as well as all the big flowery fancy stuff. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Neve. Can I just ask Councillor Hogg to repeat the recommendation so we know what we're voting about?
Let's bring it 3, 2, 1. You're back in the room. But I would like to touch on all the points that have been made, if that's okay, because we've been pretty quick with the other stuff. But tonight, what we're looking to do is approval to increase the capital programme of £48 million from 2022 in recognition of the outlined DFT funding award, and to delegate to the Director of Corporate Services to increase the 22-23 revenue budget by up to 12 million. I think that's probably subject to change, around 12 million, to be funded from BSIP grant allocation. So that's what we're here to discuss. Now, if I could just briefly touch as many of these points as I can. There's a lot in here, and it's like, you know, fix the world, basically. You don't want any increases in fares. You want all of the services that have been discontinued to remarkably appear. You want all the potholes and pavements fixed. You want the bus image to be improved, so it's really great to get on a bus. Somebody talked about human rights, which I completely accept all of these things. Now, just on some of these points, increased fares, the bus companies are commercial enterprises at the moment. We do need to put pressure on them as part of the enhanced partnership. That is what the enhanced partnership is there to do, is to build a new regulatory framework. And I'd look to officers to feel free to step in with any of this stuff if you want to. So that's part of the function of BSIP, will be to improve that relationship. But we've got to be realistic here. They are commercial enterprises at the moment, and they have just had a pay award, I believe, of something like 17%. I could be wrong about that, but quite a big pay award. There's a shortage of drivers, and effectively, pay pressures mean that, you know, sometimes those services are stretched. And of course, where we are not able to run services commercially, we're running them as supported services from a much diminished budget. I think in real terms, we have a supported service budget that's about 1/10 of what it was back in the day. So it's very difficult, because you are effectively making choices, difficult choices about one service at the expense of another service, and that's the reality at the moment. I wish it wasn't so. In terms of improving the image, one of the central parts of BSIP, which you'd know because you've read it, is that we're going to have a single unified brand of bus throughout the whole of the region, all of WECA. Wherever you get on a bus, whether it's in North Somerset, South Gloucestershire, Bristol, it'll look the same, it'll smell the same, it'll be the same, it'll be tap on, tap off. You'll just tap your card. It'll be much like you see in parts of London. That's the ambition. I think Councillor Crockford-Hawley mentioned people won't choose to go by bus, won't go on the bus because they're saving the environment. No, I quite agree. And that's why the capital funding is there to prioritise buses. What we're trying to do here is to provide an alternative to taking the car. What we want to do, the ambition is to create these transit corridors on the A38, the A370, the A369, where buses are running every 20 minutes or every 30 minutes. They're reliable because there aren't so many cars on the road. Wherever you come to a traffic light, guess what? It'll prioritise the bus. Wherever you've got 2 lanes, guess what? One of them will be a bus lane. So it's not difficult, if you look at the commissioning plan, to see how that's going to be delivered. The obvious side benefit of that is that we will hopefully make a big dent in our in our carbon emissions. I'm not sure, and I'd look to you on this one about the whether the motorway is included in our whether the 43% includes the motorway. Okay. So we talked about reliability. I think, again, because it's a bus prioritisation plan, the idea is that we'll have fewer cars on the road, more buses. The buses are going to be running on prioritised road networks, and so therefore they will be able to be more reliable. Disability access, I think that's, I don't want to say it's a given, but I think there are some standards around these buses that will mean that we have to have disability. I know because when I was trying to bring a community bus company in to deliver a service in Rington, we couldn't do it because they didn't have the statutory disability access requirements. Pavements and potholes, that's a conversation for another day. Services now, timetable changes, I'm really happy to talk to you about that separately. And Councillor Neve knows that, you know, for 3 years I've been trying to get a bus re-established in Rington. It is really difficult because right now we do still have difficult choices to make about which services to support and which ones we're unable to support. But I'm always really happy to explore the possibilities. As Councillor Charles knows, when I visited Heather Toms in Portishead to review her petition for 1,500 people, I've been able to work with Heather to provide something that's mutually agreeable. I'm really happy to work with any of you to make lives a bit better for your residents, but we can't do it all, can we? We can do anything, but we can't do everything. So anyway, back in the room. So I'm just asking for you to increase the capital programme for it. Whatever I said at the top is what I'm asking people to approve. So when you're ready.
Did we have a second? I can't actually remember. Councillor James, that's right, yes. So can we go to the vote? All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? It appears
That's
to
carried.
be.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Right. Now we're going to item number 8, which would be petitions to be presented by members, but there don't appear to be any. Item number 9, motions by members, and I believe we have one. Councillor Gibbons to introduce, please.
Thank you. I don't know if you require me to read out the motion or whether everyone will have read it. You've all read it? Good. Right.
Word for word.
Yes, good. I'm just going to add a little bit of context. So this came about because there's an organisation called Make Votes Matter, which is a cross-party, I would even say no-party organisation that supports proportional representation. And in May, they launched a new campaign, which is called Councils for PR, and suggested a draft motion that people could put to their councils, which formed the basis of this motion when my colleagues, Councillor Cartman, Councillor Bridger and Councillor Petty worked on it to make it more specific to our area and our region. Obviously, I clearly support PR because I wouldn't be the named person for this if I weren't. And I just suppose I want to say that when I talk to young people, I think that, and this happened only yesterday, they are very disengaged with politics, with local politics and politics generally. And one of the comments I had was, well, you know, if I vote and I vote for something that I'm interested in or a party that I like, I'm not going to be represented if it's not one of the big two. It's all pointless. And that's very, very depressing, I think, for our young people. The minority rule that we have today in the UK with first past the post means that large swathes of our population and the electorate are really poorly represented. And it's worse than simple underrepresentation. It results in an all-powerful majority government being elected on the minority of votes, as we are, you know, as is the case now. And I accept that could be the case if my party were in power, and I've fought for proportional representation for many, many years. And there are, as we say in the motion, examples within these aisles of other legislative assemblies, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, that have forms of proportional representation. They don't lose the constituency element. In Scotland, you vote for a constituency MP and you have your second vote. So it works very, very well. It worked for the European elections and it works across the majority of the world, I would say. So what I'm asking is that we resolve that the Council writes to the government calling for a change in this outdated electoral system to enable proportional representation to be used for UK general elections and local elections in England. And I'm going to invite my co-sponsors to speak if they would like. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gibbons. Do we have 7 people supporting a debate on this? Who would support the debate? 1, 2, yeah. Definitely more than 7, so we can proceed to the debate. Who would like to? Councillor James?
Is it possible just to note there are 9 MPs in Greater Somerset and all but 1 are Conservative? I believe that Bath is in Somerset.
Councillor Petty?
Thank you. I'll keep it really brief, but I was really pleased to work with my colleagues Catherine Gibbons, Ashley Cartman and Steve Bridger in developing this piece of work. Green Party members have been wanting to see this change and want to see a better voting system and a fairer voting system. And by saying out loud and saying proudly that North Somerset supports proportional representation in voting to support this motion today is really important to Green Party members across the district, but I know that many people from many different parties support the demand for a better and fairer system. I think there are many things we'd like to see change in our voting systems, including votes for over 16-year-olds, the removal of the need for a voter ID, but today we're here to support a move towards proportional representation. We know that within this room, we can't make that happen. So this is just a demand to government to ask them to do better. And from what we've been seeing in national government, I think we would all agree there is so much better that can happen and can be done. So this is just a short motion, and I think that it's a worthwhile thing to be committed to today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Petty. Councillor Charles?
I'd like to support this motion, and probably unpopularly for my party colleagues, I'd like to support it on the principle that it might lead to the dismantling of many of the political parties that are present in this room. The current political system relies on broad coalitions of people that don't naturally fit together. We're seeing a classic example with my Conservative friends at the moment, and we've seen it with various other parties as well. I am one of the 56% of people on Britain Thinks recent polling who no political party represents their views at all. And I am politically homeless. Proportional representation would not solve that, but it would make it easier for those broad coalitions of people to get together and form their own natural groupings to actually make it easier for us to have a representative democracy. I would also like to say as well, to sort of counter Councillor Gibbons' earlier statement, I think young people are interested in politics, I just don't think they're interested in party politics.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Anybody? Councillor Crockford-Hawley?
Yes, I'm very much in favour of proportional representation. But we do live in a world of increasing polarisation, and I'm not convinced that PR or any other system will necessarily overcome that. Is there any evidence to suggest that in those countries which have proportional representation, there is greater participation across the board rather than greater participation from those who choose to have single issue involvement with democracy? It's the single issue involvement that I find particularly worrying about the age we are in. I'm very much in favour of more people participating, but I do think we need to understand why people wish to participate.
Thank you, Councillor Crockford-Hawley. I can't see any more hands up. So are there any? Oh, there is. Councillor Davis, sorry. Okay.
To answer John's question, of course, the proportional representation to degree in Australia and Belgium, which both have compulsory voting, so you can't not get yourself involved. And one wonders every 11th of November about the sacrifices our forefathers and female equivalents therefore made to let us vote, and some people choose not to. I do think that's a measure of disrespect to those people who fell to defend democracy. That's a controversial view, possibly.
No, it's not controversial, but it's pretty weak. Why is it weak?
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Councillor Applin.
Thank you, Chair. I think I would just say that I don't think I've seen any evidence that coalitions work, and essentially PR is just going to lead to more coalitions. This council has had, you hide it probably a lot better than the Conservative Party do, but you've had your own squabbles and people leaving parties, and you see people laughing because it's very true. It just doesn't seem to solve any of the issues. You're, as Councillor Charles said, you're trying to put people together who don't necessarily and naturally fit together. And I think what it makes very, very easy is to put promises on election leaflets, and then when it turns out to choose your coalition, you can say, well, we wanted to go ahead with this, but we didn't because we had to go along with what the coalition said, which happened in the Conservative and Lib Dem coalition on both sides. And I think it has happened on this coalition as well. So, yeah. Oh, that's exactly what I just said. No, it didn't. That's exactly what I just said. Yeah. So in my lifetime, which isn't as long as many here, I've just not seen them work. And yeah, so for me, no evidence PR is going to work either.
Thank you, Councillor Applin. I believe Councillor Charles has got his hand up again.
It's only to borrow from Councillor McQuillan, who's put the figures up. It's actually 10% higher voting in PR voting countries than non-PR voting countries, and when you remove Australia and Switzerland that have compulsory voting, it rises to 79%, so nearly 18% higher.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Councillor Bird.
Just to state a fact that the only other country in Europe which has our pure first-past-the-post system is Belarus. That says a mountain.
Thank you, Councillor Bird, for this insight. Yeah. So can we proceed to a vote then? All those in favour? All those against? Some against, 4 against. And any abstentions? No abstentions. Solicitor?
Carried, Chairperson.
I believe it's carried. Thank you. Right. Question time. Standing order item number 18. Can I just remind members to supply the clerk with a note of your question for inclusion in the minutes, please, at the end of this. The first question, I believe, comes from Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Chairman. At the end of June, there was a well-attended public demonstration in Portbury concerned at the size, volume and speed of the traffic going through the village. This is a common complaint from many of our rural communities. In Portbury, the size of some of the lorries coming off the motorway has resulted in the wing mirrors actually hitting the windows of the nearest houses. The volume and speed of traffic is a very real danger to pedestrians, especially children on their way to catching the school bus, as there is very little pavement. The roads are deteriorating, roadside hedges and footpaths are overgrown and in places impassable. This is not rewilding, this is just dangerous. These are not minor roads to be ignored. They are the only connection these villages have, and they are vital to the rural communities. To say that there is not enough funding is not good enough. The safety of residents, surely of all ages, has to be a priority on anyone's list. Will the exec member agree to come with me to see the gravity of the situation?
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. I believe Councillor Hogg is probably the appropriate member to reply.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. Thank you. And thank you very much to Councillor Ashton for the question in advance. I mean, the short answer is yes, of course. I'd be delighted to come out and meet you. Perhaps when you're feeling a bit better, I'll come out and spend a couple of hours with you walking around the patch. Just to break your question down into two chunks. The first bit about the size, volume and speed of traffic. I understand that officers received a petition from a resident in the spring. I can certainly understand how people feel locally. Portbury Lane carries a lot of traffic from Nailsea, Long Ashton to the motorway. I think one of the problems is where would it go instead? You couldn't push it through Tickenham. So I think that is a somewhat of a constraint. Portbury does have a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, which was something we fought very hard for in Rington and took about 7 years to implement. And I understand also that the accident statistics are what we'd consider to be good. And I know that doesn't really do much for the amenity value in terms of how it feels walking to school, but certainly the stats suggest that they're good. So I think I would say I understand the frustration of residents. We've got limited alternative routes. And the reality is, although officers sign the main routes, locals choose to use the shortest, most convenient route. BSIP will deliver something, I suppose, in terms of the modal shift, so that will take people out of the private car towards public transport. There might be some other things that we can do with an active travel. I think simply diverting traffic elsewhere won't fix the problem, but I'd be really happy to discuss it with you when I come and see you.
Could I come back to you on that?
Yeah, sure.
It's not about shifting it. We would have done that years ago if that was the answer. I agree with you. And the traffic that goes through Portbury then goes through Tickenham a lot of the time anyway. But there is a solution, and that's to actually restrict the flow one way. There's a narrows there, but it's not restricted to one at a time, half the time. It's speed and actually coordinating around that sharp bend, the traffic that comes round there. There is a way to do it through either a light or a camera, and that's what I want to show you. But more importantly, that's what the community would like to show you. It's not just whinging about it, it's actually coming up with a solution.
Yeah, no problem. No, I didn't take it as a whinge, and I'm really happy to come out and see you, and we'll perhaps meet. We'll bring an officer with us, and we can have a look and see what's possible. In terms of the second part of your conversation, your question around roads deteriorating, roadside hedges being overgrown, I've checked on this for you. I think officers have received 5 complaints regarding overgrown vegetation in Portbury Parish this year, 4 of which have been addressed. So I think, that usual message and mantra, and this goes for everybody here, is to yourselves use the online portal to report issues and make sure that your parish councils and your residents are fully aware of how to do that. Now, I accept there's probably stuff that hasn't been reported that is currently there that needs to be looked at. The second and final cut of the rural verges is happening now. So it's basically one tractor going around the whole of North Somerset with a mounted flail doing the whole of the county. That work is programmed to cut the A roads first, then the B roads, etc. But it's worth noting that service is to cut verges, not roadside hedges, which I think you referenced in your question. That obviously is the responsibility of the landowner. But again, that might be something we can talk about when I come out. In terms of roads, we've got an agreed programme of maintenance work. This year's funding has seen an increase of 1.25 million over previous years, so that is positive. We know that some potholes have been reported in Portbury through the proper channels. I'm really happy to get an update from officers on where we are in terms of remedying those, but I doubt all have. And again, we can perhaps discuss that when I come out. So yes, so absolutely happy to come and meet you. And thanks for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hogg. Yeah, it's probably more of a statement rather than a question, but I understand the meaning behind it. The next question is from, hang on, where am I? Councillor Payne. on the condition of St James Street in Weston-super-Mare.
Thank you very much. The question for Councillor Hogg again. The northern end of St James Street in Weston has become closed to traffic as a result of the changes to the roads around the new bus interchange. But there's no plans currently to make any physical changes to the road, and as a result, the street looks neglected and unwelcoming. And to visitors to the town who may not be familiar with the area, it can appear to be completely closed off. The resultant loss of footfall is having a significant effect on some of the businesses in the street. Would the executive member, along with officers, agree to engage with me and some of those traders to develop a plan to try and improve the street?
Thank you.
Councillor
Councillor Hogg,
Yeah,
you seem to have a long list of questions today.
I'm really happy to come and have a chat with you and look at the problem. I think there was insufficient budget to resurface St James's Street as part of the recent works on the new interchange. But I will pick it up with the relevant officer because it's part of the town centre regeneration project. So, I'll be happy to pick up with you in due course on that one, yeah. We perhaps won't put a date in the diary just yet.
And I believe Councillor Payne has got a second question.
I'm not picking on Councillor Hogg, honestly, but this is for him as well. The Clevedon Road Railway Bridge in Weston is a route, but the pavements over the bridge are 70 centimetres wide on one side and 80 centimetres wide on the other, which makes it feel very unsafe for pedestrians, particularly those using wheelchairs or pushchairs, with the railway barrier on one side and the heavy traffic on the other. So would you look to develop a scheme to improve the pedestrian facilities over the bridge in the interest of road safety and also the promotion of active travel?
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Over to you again, Councillor Hogg.
I'm aware of the bridge and the difficulties going over it. The problem we've got there, obviously, is the bridge is owned and maintained by Network Rail. So that is a problem. And in reality, the bridge needs replacing, and that's going to be, well over £1 million. We can definitely ask Network Rail to look at it. I think the carriageway is about 5.5 metres wide. So in terms of widening the carriageway, anyway, we'd do it really by signalling or reducing the flow through that bridge, which obviously would be a pinch point then along that busy route. So I don't think there's any easy solutions, but I'll happily notify Network Rail, but it isn't one of ours to maintain, sadly.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg. And I believe we have been notified of a fourth question from Councillor Charles about the Portishead East parking.
Thank you, and if time allows, I've literally had something that was this afternoon. I'd like a second question for Councillor Solomon that he's aware of, but this one's for Councillor Hogg. Yet another request for a date with Councillor Hogg. I think he's a very popular person this evening. With regards to Portishead East and parking, I don't know if Councillor Hogg's aware, but one of the upsides, which is also a downside of the pandemic, is the beautiful marina and cafes and situated nature reserve in Portishead East and bordering has become something of a day trip attraction for many, many people, which has caused huge congestion and parking within the East Ward area. On top of that, we've had additional parking issues which have been long-standing in the Portishead East Ward, which have caused delays in rubbish collection and also examples of delays of access to emergency services as well. I think drastic action is needed for the village quarter and the marina area of East Ward, and it's not going to please everybody, but I would like to be another one of those people that invites Councillor Hogg to walk some of that area and see firsthand some of those problems. And also, slightly disappointed, Steve, you're a bit dismissive about the human experience, but the human experiences of people there as well with regards to access, which is very important.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Councillor Hogg again.
Oh, we're going back to a previous item now. I'm all about human experience. I think I was laughing at the breadth of questions I was getting on a BSIP paper that was about approving a capital fund. But I can start the answer to this question, and then I'm going to hand you over to Councillor Solomon. But I think we've put lots of WLO lines there. Thank you for your invitation. I will take you up on that. I was there on Sunday, actually, as it happens. I can see there's a problem. I don't think there's any easy solutions. There are unadopted streets as part of that development. There's been a lot of yellow lines that have been put through. We could implement more parking restrictions, but that would probably increase speeds on the road. So I don't know what the solutions are, but I'm happy to engage with you. And I know that Councillor Solomon's probably got something in this as well. Councillor Solomon.
Yes. Yeah. The enforcement side of things is something I'd need to look into now with our enforcement team. We're short of wardens, and we're looking to recruit more if we can, which would help resolve matters if we can enforce it and it's not the police enforcing it. So if I may, I'll take this away, talk to our enforcement teams and see if there's anything we can do to slap a few tickets on cars, if that will help to stop people parking where they shouldn't be parking.
Thank you, Councillor Solomon. Is that any other questions? Councillor Charles, you can ask a supplementary question.
It's one for Mr. Solomon, and he is perfectly aware about it. I've literally received this late this evening from Portishead Town Council, where the Vice Chair and one of the Town Council questioned a contractor operative that was spraying glyphosate pesticides. The Town Council were led to believe that there was a moratorium on that the Town Council had actually voted to support a complete ban on it, and North Somerset were going to have a moratorium on that until the issue was sorted. The Town Councillors spoke to the gentleman spraying, who said it was glyphosate. When they asked them to stop, they said, we're under instruction from North Somerset to do this, and this is what we'll do. Could Mr. Solomon look into this, please?
Yes, unfortunately, this one came in too late, and the officer I wanted to speak to had unfortunately signed out and hasn't picked up the email to find out exactly what happened today, whether we were spraying there, because again it was my understanding as well that we wouldn't be spraying in Portishead. So tomorrow I will get an answer from the officer and come back to you on that as to what went on, and I'm not aware that our policy has changed, so let me get to the bottom of this one for you, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Solomon. Councillor Applin, I believe you raised your hand.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question for Councillor Solomon. Me, Marcia, and Councillor Pepperell and Councillor Jan Holloway, who's a Western Town Councillor, were out canvassing in North Wales on Colston Drive this weekend. And almost every house that we knocked on mentioned the overgrown weeds near Priory School and along the River Banwell. Some of the families were actually quite upset about the loss of light and views. We've checked with officers, and this isn't rewilding. It's, weeds and overgrown branches that are catching people as they walk past and just generally looking untidy in the area. I was wondering if Councillor Solomon would come meet me, Marcia as well, and some of the residents in this area, and see whether there's anything you can suggest to be done, because we have tried with officers before, especially due to the lack of light and some of the views that people have lost, and also the safety aspect, especially for runners and cyclists. Just thought you might be interested in coming and having a look.
More than happy to come and have a look with you. After the meeting, we'll liaise and set a date. Yeah,
that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Tucker.
Thank you, Chair. This one to the member for Highways again, I'm afraid. I've been lobbied by residents in Hewington Road, which runs from Milton Road through to Earlham Grove, to see if we can look at the possibility of getting a 20-mile-an-hour zone installed there, please. I don't know if Western members will certainly be familiar with that road. There's a pinch point at the end of it, which has caused a few problems over the years in terms of vehicles coming either way, not giving way, etc. And people obviously not really respecting the residents as they drive through at faster than they should. So I wonder if that could be taken up, please.
Thank you, Councillor Tucker. I believe Councillor Hogg is hogging this meeting again.
If I had £1 for every time I'd heard that joke. I'm really happy to come and meet you and have a chat about it. I mean, I quite like, I mean, I'm a fan of 20-mile-an-hour zones, don't get me wrong, but sometimes I think people come with like a ready-baked solution for a problem, but sometimes it's quite good actually just to go back to the problem and look and see what the problem is and see if we can find some solutions for it, one of which may well be a 20-mile-an-hour scheme. So assuming this hasn't been raised with officers previously, it's fresh, there is a new sort of front door process that officers have worked up about how we get these schemes in for validation, for assessment and those sorts of things. So that'll put some governance around how we actually deliver these schemes in future, which is really good. So, you know, I'd be really happy for a future scheme to become part of that new process. But if you don't mind, just indulge me for an hour or two if we meet on site, and then we just hold back on what the solution is until we've allowed officers a bit of time to have a look and see what they think the remedy might be. But I'm really happy to come and meet you.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg. No further questions by the look of it. Okay, item 11, matters referred from previous meetings. I believe there were none. And then item number 12 is the chairperson's announcements, which I believe is me. I just wanted to say really sorry that I cancelled the social gathering. As you know, I have a vague medical background, keep a close eye on all the goings on in this pandemic, and I was too concerned. So I called it off, and after I called it off, I was actually supported by our public health team as well. They were equally concerned. So I believe it was probably the right decision, and I'm really sorry because we were all looking forward to it. I certainly was. And I just hope we can reinstate it the next time, but we can't look into the future, so I have no idea whether it will be possible or not. I will look at, I believe the venue which I had chosen originally is room 58, which has no outside ventilation, so it was particularly unsuitable. So I will investigate if we can use a different room which can be made a bit safer, but I will consult with our public health team on this, and I won't do anything until they've given the go-ahead. The other thing that I think we're all really excited about, we're waiting for the sea monster. It was meant to arrive today. I walked to the seafront and it's not there yet. I believe there's some delays yet again. But I think we will all, I'm sure there will be some knees up and some get together and some official openings, and hopefully it'll all happen very soon. So that's the end of my announcement. Leader's announcement. Councillor Bridger has sent his apologies. Any deputy? No announcement from our deputy leader. Chief executive announcement? None either. And then the forward plan dated the 1st of July 22, and I believe our deputy leader, Councillor Bell, will present.
Thank you, Chair. Just for noting, so I'm sure that if there are any questions that anyone's got, they will direct them to the relevant exec member or officer.
This is an item just to be noted, I believe. Okay. And I believe there is one a report from our policy and scrutiny panel, and I believe Councillor Griggs has got a report.
Sorry to hold you all up, but I felt it was really important to give you some highlights for what's happening in children's services. As you know, over the last 2 years, we've been working very hard, officers and members, to try and raise children's services to an Ofsted and a QCA good, if not outstanding. I just wanted to highlight 2 or 3 really exciting things that may have passed you by. Bay Tree School expansion in Clevedon is actually being built now as we speak. The new SEMH, social and emotional and well-being school for our young people, is hopefully moving towards a planning application. These 2 builds will give an enormous number of extra school places to our children with special educational needs. It will bring children in from hopefully outside county to be educated nearer their families and in the county. These are 2 really exciting projects, and when you get the press releases from the council, you'll know now what they're talking about. They're really exciting and really positive. We are the only authority, and Sheila can correct me here if I've got it wrong, that are investing in the Mockingbird project. And the Mockingbird project is where our foster carers are helping other foster carers to promote stability and support for each other. We're the only authority in the Southwest, and it's due to our director here that it is happening in our authority, and we are actually an authority that's helping other authorities. This is a really exciting and positive move, and well done to the officers for getting this going. We have always operated what's called a front door. When Ofsted arrived, they found all sorts of different front doors providing support and services to our families and children and other organisations. This has now been revamped, revitalised. We have 1 front door in North Somerset, 1 front door for everyone to access if they have worries, concerns for our children and our families. This front door is now working really, really well. And as one of the officers said, next time Ofsted comes, we're not just going to be good, we're going to be outstanding. And I think I can say that for all of us, for the members involved in children's services and for the officers. That is an ambition we've all got. Next time Ofsted come, next time we have a QCA review, we want to be good, even outstanding. It's a really exciting place for our statutory services, and if any of you want to become more involved, just let me know, and we'd welcome you to the scrutiny panels, to the task and finish groups, to help involve this journey, this exciting journey forward for our children's services. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Councillor Griggs, for the good news. Thank you. Item number 17 would be corporate parenting report. You do have a report. Okay, Councillor Gibbons.
We don't have a written report, but I have a few things I want to say. You will have noticed when you came in, oh dear, it's falling down. We have got some large pledge cards at the back of the room, which we are asking members, elected members, and indeed anybody who is a corporate parent, that is an employee of the council, and indeed, we will be possibly taking it out wider to our schools and partner agencies to sign, just to have, so we have a very visible piece of evidence to show our young people our commitment to our pledge toward them. And Sheila has kindly sent that out to you. But basically, we're in the process of refreshing the promise that we make to our young people that you will have all received in your guide to corporate parenting, because you are all corporate parents, every single one of you. It comes with the job. And basically, what you're signing there is to recommit to finding a caring home for young people, to find careers for them and assist them, to help them understand why they're not living with their parents, why they're in the situation they are, to help them spend time with parents if possible, or brothers or sisters, to make sure that they know who their social worker is and their trusted adults, and that they know how to contact them. There's a list. I won't go through every single point, but these are commitments that are really important. I mean, as my colleague Councillor Griggs is saying, you know, it is a wonderfully rewarding world to work in, that of children's services, and every single one of you can make a difference to our children You know, you can, for example, as we had discussed in that meeting back in July 2020, when members offered to help in so many different ways. Now COVID is receding, we've been talking about how to reactivate that. We particularly want to reach out to businesses, so I'm asking you in your communities, if you know of local businesses that will be able to offer work experience or internships, or even a week of just sort of sitting in and seeing what happens. That would be huge, and just show that commitment to our young people, as we would to our own children in our families. So that's the reason behind that, and I hope you'll all sign up, and sooner or later we can show our young people that we have signed and we have really thought about what it means to be a corporate parent and what we can do for them. And I have another announcement, another action for you as corporate parents. Paul Johnson, our head of corporate parenting, has reminded me that in September there will be a special big thank you for foster carers. So what he has asked is that if every single one of us could record on a camera, I think Beth is here with hers, if she isn't we can do it a different way, just say thank you. And the team will cut and paste that all together to make a video of the corporate parents thanking the foster carers for all that they do. So that's the two actions I want from you, and I hope that you'll support us in that, and also, you know, really, really think about those young people and the huge difference you and I and everyone can make to their lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gibbons. That's, yeah, quite inspirational. Now, item 18, reports and matters referred from the policy overview and scrutiny panels, other than those dealt with elsewhere. I believe there are none. And reports and matters referred from the other committees, other than those dealt with elsewhere, and there are none either. Reports on joint arrangements and external organizations and questions relating to thereto. The first one is Avon Fire Authority. We have none there. Avon and Somerset Police and Crime Panel. I believe Councillor Westwood wanted to present, but has now had to send his apologies. So I believe that is not happening.
Chairperson, Councillor Westwood did provide a written report, which is amongst your papers.
Apparently there's a written report, so we can look into that. Thank you. And the next one is West of England Combined Authority Joint Scrutiny Committee. There's none either. And I believe there is no urgent business, which means that we have reached the end of this meeting. So thank you very much, and don't all rush out. Remember the plea from Councillor Gibbons. Thank you very much.